Welcome to the Teacher's Pep Rally. If you missed our last episode, we talked about integrating game-based learning with social-emotional learning with Matthew Farber. Please go back and check it out. And while you're there, please leave us a review. We value you and these conversations. Our guest today wears many hats. He is a creative director and has taught graphic design, computer graphics, and then some for over 22 years at the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. He has created a safe platform and insightful content to support people who are grieving. He has a gift for discussing the hard topics on death and loss with a feeling of safety while underlining the conversation around thinking about new paths and a journey to grateful. Please welcome on the Teacher's Pep Rally, Tim Bigonia.
Hey,
Tim!
Hello, all. How are you, my friends?
We are great. We are so happy to have you here.
Happy to be here.
See you.
Yeah, it's been a long time
you.
coming. Before we get started, Tim, we've got a little thing we've started this season. Letitia, do you want to share what that is?
Yes, Tim. So we've started something called Happy Happenings, and it's basically an opportunity for us to be very intentional about, picking out those great things that happen throughout the day or the week rather, and just giving it a voice and sharing it with each other and with our audience, because we just feel that there's so much negativity going around that can really kind of bring us down. And so this is an opportunity for us to share. So I'm going to go around and we'll do round table, and you will go last, Tim, to give you some time to think of your happy happening. And today I'm starting with Erin.
I just knew it.
Awesome.
She was looking down.
Fred's not first. Fred's not
first. And I'm actually looking something up because all of a sudden I realize I sometimes when it starts, I already know what I'm going to say. And then as you're talking, I shift. So I shifted.
Okay.
I love books, as you all know.
Yes.
So happy happening, hot off the presses, pun intended today. I got a notice because I follow some of my favorite authors.
Okay.
Barbara Kingsolver has a new book coming out October 18th. She wrote a lot of books, but most people probably know for the Poisonwood Bible. She has a new book coming out, and it's called Demon Copperhead. Copperhead. And it's kind of a modern adaptation of a Charles Dickens novel. And you know me, I'm kind of a nerd. I love the old classics. So I'm excited to read this. And it's about a young boy in poverty and what he goes through. He lives up in the Appalachian Mountains. But again, it kind of is like a Charles Dickens type thing. So that's my nerdy happy happenings as I wait for that book to get delivered.
So like an Oliver Twisty type thing, right?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Oh, nice.
Yes.
Very cool. All right.
I love that. And the shameless plug for all the fans.
All my Kingsolver fans out there.
That's right. I love it. So Pete, take us away with your happy happening.
I swear this is not a cop-out.
Okay.
Honestly, just seeing you guys tonight is my happy happening.
Aww.
Especially Tim tonight. Tim, oh my gosh, you guys are in such a store for a treat. In store for such a treat. He's such a voice of strength and calm and peace and joy and love. And one of my favorite humans on the planet. And there we go. There he is. So yes, it's been a week, and honestly, you guys are the highlight. So that's what I got this week.
Awesome. Thank you.
I love it. And nothing is a cop-out. It's whatever touches your heart, right? Big or small.
That's
Fred, your happy happening.
So my happy happenings had me getting back into a ritual that I abandoned because of COVID. I don't think it's a secret by now. I'm a still persistent long hauler, right? Getting better. But prior to COVID, I maintained a pretty steady exercise regimen, going to the gym. I'm not a muscle bodybuilding kind of guy, but I do like to stay in shape so I could not fall apart. And I had to leave the gym because, the concerns that were going on there. I started to work out of my own home. But this past week, I returned to the gym, and it was interesting. It was one of those moments, it's like getting back onto a bike, right? Like if you haven't ridden a bike in a long time, you get back on, it comes right back. And it felt just good. It just felt good. So if any of you are on the fence about getting back into a routine of exercise, the endorphin release and the actual motion, getting back into motion, it had such a great effect on me that day. And now I just have to, I'll just get right back into my routine of some sort. It'll probably be a little bit different, but it was good to be back in the gym, exercising. So it was good. I love it.
Excellent.
Yes.
That is awesome. That's awesome, man. We've already talked about reading, right? This is all self-care, right? Reading, socializing with friends, getting back in the gym.
Nice.
We planned it.
Love those muscles. You're flexing there, Fred. I mean,
Flex.
The SNL skit of pump, I'm going to pump.
Oh, yeah,
you
pump
up is
you
like
up.
that's what I'm envisioning Fred doing. But
Just yeah, my 50-year-old butt.
I love it. I love it. Well, Tim, you mentioned your daughter before we started recording. So my happy happening happens to be about lunch that I had with my daughter, Tim. She just turned 30. And I'm going to try not to get sappy, but we were at lunch, nothing unusual about it. And we were having such great conversation, laughing. And she was looking at me in such a way that I just never picked up on. There was just a sense of love and admiration. And I don't know, I just felt absolutely loved by her.
Wow, that's
and
wonderful.
Carrying my bags to the car, and she bought me popcorn at TJ Maxx. I mean, it was like all of that. And it was kind of like this moment where, you're in the throes of parenting and you don't know what's sticking and what's not. And then kind of adulthood sets in and they start to realize all the sacrifices you've made. And
Sure.
I just feel like on Saturday, there was this moment where time stood still and I felt absolutely loved and admired by her.
Nice.
And so that's my happy happening. I know it was super sappy, but I just want to encourage us all, to live in the moment. And I think, especially having Tim today, it'll probably hone in that message even more, the importance of living in the moment. So with that being said, Tim, what is your happy happening?
Well, I have to admit, I kind of cheated because I listened to earlier episodes and discovered that this was going to be coming. So then I had to really, I'm just going to be very honest with you guys. I had to dig deep. For some reason, yesterday I was a bit down. And obviously that happens just in life. It doesn't have to be associated with grief. Sometimes it's a good day and sometimes you have days that just, for whatever reason, and oftentimes I will say, gosh, I don't know why. And some people, some of my friends who know me very well kind of look at me and go, you know why. And I'm like, but you don't get it. Yes, there's always that underlying reason. But as I was considering what my happy happenings is, and it was soon after I had a conversation with my daughter on the phone, who's in grad school, and one of my boys was headed off to football practice, and the other one just got picked up for robotics. And I just thought to myself,
oh, cool.
That's my happy happening. It always is, and it always will be. It will be those three amazing, strong, independent, on their way to making the world exactly what they want it to be. And I am so proud of who they are. I'm proud of why they are who they are. And I blame most everything on my wife, because anything good came from her. Anything bad, I also blame on her, but they don't let me get away with that. But they are wonderful. And any day that I need to know why I should be happy and should be grateful, all I have to do is look at there, and there they are. So that's mine.
Yes, that is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing and for your deep honesty. And as always here at TPR, we want to encourage our listeners, new and old, to maybe start taking advantage of the opportunity to really focus on the good and the happy happenings, because, to Tim's point, every day is not a great day, but there's always an opportunity for us to find happiness and gratitude in a moment. So thank you guys again for sharing this week. Erin, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. So Tim, I said this earlier, I wanted to get you on when we started this podcast a couple years ago, because around that time, I actually lost a student that I had taught, a very young man, 15 years old, passed away. Wow. And I thought, gosh, I know I'm not the only teacher, because I have other friends who have lost students.
Sure.
But if you haven't lost a student, then there's some of us that often try to support a kid in our schools because they lost someone they love. And so there's all these kinds of layers. I think it's just part of being human is that we have to deal with death and loss. So before we get started, Tim, I'm gonna ask you in a minute to, if you don't mind, to share just a little bit about your story to Journey to Grateful. But I am gonna let our listeners know and our friends know that if this is just a subject right now that's really difficult for you to hear, this is just kind of letting you know right now we are going to be talking about death and loss. I think towards the end, you'll see that we're going to be talking more about being grateful and living in the moment, like Letitia said. But I do want to kind of warn our listeners that this is going to be the subject today. So, Tim, do you mind telling us a little bit of your story?
Of course. Let's see. I always wonder how far back I should go, but my story, because of Journey to Grateful podcast that I launched in April of 2021, came about because in February of 2017, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she went through all the treatments that you would normally go through, and dealt with all the chemo and worked full time through almost every single one of the treatments. And she was, and still is, and always has been, the strongest person that I know. And she really fought hard. And what we thought was successfully took on the challenge and came out the other side doing very well. And December of 2018, it was December 30th, we got done with dinner. She sat on the couch, and 12 feet away from the couch was the bathroom door. And she started walking around, and I asked her, "What are you looking for?" And she said, "Well, I'm looking for the restroom." So I knew something was up. She also could not get out of the bathroom easily herself, so we couldn't figure out what was going on. She also had diabetes, not severe, but I was wondering if that could be the situation. Contacted her sister who lived close, and she headed over, checked her blood sugars, and everything was fine. So we decided, okay, time to go to the emergency room. And from that moment, in about 20 minutes, they took a CT and discovered that her cancer metastasized into brain tumors. So from that moment on, she took on a completely different battle, and we did absolutely everything and more that we could possibly do. And she went through a very stringent regimen of different types of medication, injected as well as pill. And it came to a moment when in March, April of 2020, we realized that we did all that we could possibly do. And she early on talked with her oncologist and said, "You need to be honest with me 100% of the time. You need to tell me when I need to speak to my children." And he kept his word, and he did. And we decided at that time to do in-home hospice because it was certainly during COVID. And we engaged in-home hospice June 8th, and she passed July 3rd of 2020. So once this entire process went through, we had to deal with a brand new normal. And I know that term oftentimes is a very difficult term for people to really accept, but that is definitely what has happened. Our life is definitely not what it was or what it was planned to be. So my children, very strong, a lot of support, family, friends, school support like you would not believe, helped us through and still continue to this day to help us through. And as I was coming out of the first few months without her, I needed to find a reason for this to have happened to us, for something to come out of this. And in fact, she even herself came to me a few months after her diagnosis and said that she needed to find a reason for this to have happened. And I had mistaken her comment and said, "You're never going to find out why you contracted cancer." And she said, "No, you don't understand. I've got to be able to do something with this. And she did. A couple months after she was diagnosed, she contacted a couple of her doctors, and she was able to counsel 2 or 3 people via phone that were going through a similar situation that she was, but several months behind her, so that she could give them kind of guideposts along the way and kind of help them understand what was about to come. So taking that concept, I thought, this whole grief thing, first of all, should be much more in the forefront of everybody's life. It shouldn't be such a mystery, and it shouldn't be so misunderstood. I want to pull back the curtain, and I want to be honest with people, and I also want to demystify so many aspects that people either are shy away from when they know somebody who is going through loss, or that just simply don't understand. The biggest one would be some people out there really feel that there is a beginning and an end to grief. And that to me is just so silly. My love for my wife did not stop the moment that she passed, and it doesn't go anywhere. And in fact, in many ways, grief is the absence of a place to go with that love. So I set out to create, well, actually at the time I was going to think about, hey, maybe public speaking would be good. And me going through what I was, and then also all of us as a country and as a world going through pandemic, public speaking wasn't necessarily the best choice. And I talked to a friend of ours, and he said, well, why not a podcast? And I thought, oh, okay, challenge accepted. And of course, it's, coming up with the podcast was not that difficult. Coming up with the name of the podcast was a little bit more challenging. And myself being a creative director, I felt, I could probably achieve this. This isn't going to be that difficult. But, when you're trying to do something for your personal self, not a client, it is so much different. And it was several days. I just jotted down anything and everything and any idea that I could. And finally one day, and I don't know why it hit me, but I walked into our bedroom, and back in 2017, probably 2 or 3 months into Colleen's diagnosis, she purchased a pillow, and it just simply says grateful on it. And she said, I need this because I need to know every day that there's going to be at least something to be grateful for, no matter how I feel at the time. And that's where Journey to Grateful came from. It was just very obvious and very much appropriate, but I just had to work through everything before I got to that point. So one other detail, if I may, about Journey to Grateful and my entire journey, Colleen's journey was also much different than just simply us meeting and us getting married. She lost her first husband in 1999. So she unwittingly, through our relationship and many discussions, taught me much about grieving and how she went through it. So when her husband passed, she had a 9-month-old daughter, which I definitely call my daughter. And, even at that time, I said, how in the world did you do it? And she said, I had no choice. I had to, for that little girl. So it made all the sense in the world, but I just never thought of it until that moment when she said, well, I didn't have a choice. And she had support as well. I cannot tell you how much support truly can help.
I love that you mentioned, Tim, or that you demystified or debunked, if you will, this idea that grief is some neat, pretty pattern, right? I mean, we have the cycles of grief, right? But it's there, to me, no beginning or end.
Absolutely. And it doesn't go in a specific
order.
Succession.
Right.
Definitely
absolutely.
not. Absolutely
right,
not.
Right.
There's an analogy I often use as a tangled ball of string. Grief is not on a nice, neat timeline. It's like a tangled ball of string. And as you go through certain aspects of grief, you're going to cross over another one that you've already experienced. You thought that you were done with that part of it, but you're not. And it just suddenly hits you again.
Absolutely. I'll share just very recently, actually this weekend, my sister, her son became a dad. So I'm a great aunt. Isn't that awesome?
Nice.
Hey.
However, this weekend, I just went into this state of extreme grief and sadness over my dad, because I thought to myself, he would have been in seventh heaven had he been around to embrace his first great grandchild.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I just started having all these memories of my dad and how much he loved babies and all. I mean, and so to your point, Tim, for that time period, I was in full on grief. It felt that way, even though he's been gone for many, many years, 10 plus years. Dad has been gone. So
definitely,
definitely want to encourage our listeners. This is not some neat package.
No.
Fred, I see the wheels turning over there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think there's all, and it all gets driven too by your culture and your upbringing and everything else, whether, and I don't want to boil it down to just also how a male handles it differently maybe than a female handles it because of the expectations of society and blah, blah, blah. But I think they are all in there. There's no doubt about it. And I think you're right. Everybody handles grief in their own way, and you should be okay with that. Because it does. It comes and goes, right? It's like waves.
Yep. And it's not a sign of weakness.
No,
it's a sign of love. That's what it is. And that's what people are really missing when they're thinking of others that are going through it. Sometimes it becomes almost this inconvenience for somebody on the outside to have to deal with somebody that is going through grief. And that type of a thought process I have to believe that it's coming from somebody who has never lost anybody. And I know when I was growing up, grief was like those 2 weeks after somebody passed where family got together. You did a lot of dinners. You went to the funeral. You saw and met aunts, uncles, and cousins you never knew you had. And then everybody went back to their lives, and that was the end of grief. That's definitely not.
Well, I can remember that. I do remember that when I lost my father when I was very young. That, as you just described it, that's exactly what it was. It was this great, big, massive coming together. That's still back in the day when there would be 2 days of viewings and then the funeral, and there were 2 days of viewings, but they would be day and night viewings, right? They would be like in the afternoon and then back in the evening. It was just a juggernaut. And I remember, from a kid trying to process that, starting to look at it as in a different way. Like it was a sad event. Obviously, I lost my father, but at the same time, all the people were around, and they were also an outpouring of love and affection and attention. And all of a sudden, when it was time for everybody to go back to where they came from, there was like a trough. I could remember it, but it was one of those moments where that's when it really started to hit me as a kid growing up, and and you kind of drag that along through time too.
Absolutely. I love, Fred, how you mentioned culture, right? Because as I'm thinking through, I was raised Catholic, and so Catholic funerals and grief, very stoic, very quiet, very reserved. I think that's a good word. And then I moved to the South, and I attend a celebration of life, and I'm like, this is a concert. Like, this is an event. Like, there's music and singing and speeches and jokes and crying and dancing. And I'm like, yeah, I think I want to kind of arrange and plan my own, because this is pretty awesome. Right. And so I guess the spaces in which we grow up kind of give us permission, I guess, to grieve in different ways, which is what I love that you do, Tim. You provide this space for people to just share openly. So good stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, I think everybody should be encouraged to grieve the way that they need to and the way that it feels right for them to grieve, and for however long. Yes, there is an importance to find a way to move forward, but it does not have a timeline either. It doesn't have a deadline. And moving forward could be the smallest little step. It does not have to be a giant leap, does not have to be consistent. As long as you're not slipping backwards, you're certainly trying to move forward would be just fine.
Absolutely.
Since we know that there is no set limit of when the grief ends or when it might sneak up on you, I'm just thinking about, educators, whether it's a colleague, a student, if that seems to pop up in the classroom. I know we all have our techniques, but is there anything just from your experience and your talks with other people, Tim, that you think could help an educator, especially if they're not quite sure how to handle it? What to do? What's the safest thing to do to try to help support that kiddo or colleague?
I think first and foremost is not pretend that it doesn't exist. You have to be, I hate to use the word transparent, but you just have to be honest and try to take cues from that student. Although this did not happen once when my wife passed, because she passed in the summertime, but after her diagnosis, we were fortunate enough to our kids went to a Catholic school, and we had been there since our daughter was in school, so we knew everybody. And we requested a meeting with the counselor and the principal and a teacher. There may have been two teachers there. And we explained to them what was going on with the diagnosis. And we kept the lines of communication open. And several weeks into it, maybe it was a couple of months into it, our oldest son at the time was, I think, in seventh grade, sixth or seventh grade, he started acting out. So we came back in and we talked with him as well as the teachers, and they set up a system because of the way that we were just being honest with him and we were asking him for feedback, that he would get permission from any teacher at any point in time in his day to simply get up and walk out, and the teacher would understand that there was a reason most likely associated with this and he just needed to walk away. And then he would come back and later on explain to the teacher what had happened. And just giving him that freedom, just giving him the idea in his head that first of all, he could do it without any repercussions. And second of all, he could do it and people would understand why. The people who really mattered would understand why. That really, really helped him a lot. So if you could borrow upon that for anybody who has lost somebody and you have a student who is grieving inside and out 24/7, you have to come to that student with understanding and express to them, communicate with them that, hey, this is what I'm going to offer you. Let me know if that works for you. Let them give you some feedback, some ideas, and perhaps give them just a little bit of a unique extra way for them to be able to express themselves or to get out of a situation. Because what student wants to cry in front of all their friends?
Right.
Even though the friends would understand, nobody wants to do that. So maybe there's something that happens that they just need to walk away from. Give them that ability to do so.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think giving the space, hopefully just communication. Sometimes we don't know what's going on until there's an incident, and then we find out, and of course do whatever we can to try to help and support
Certainly.
the kiddos. But
Certainly.
I think sometimes people forget that we're with them all day long, and just let us know. We'll keep it private if we need to, but just let us be there for those moments, like you said, to try to figure out what can we do to help the kid or the student.
Colleen and I thought that, it was so necessary to engage the teachers and the principal because our children are with them so long each and every day. They're not going to be able to turn it off once they get to school and turn it back on when they get home and just reserve all their grief for at home. It's just not going to happen. So let's meet them where they are going to be. And of course, with our situation, we knew every one of those teachers. Very, very good experience because of who those people are.
Yeah. I think, Letitia, you've talked a lot about how schools are, it's our community. It's whether you have kids there or not. If you live in the neighborhood, that's our community. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really good opportunity for educators and the parents to really be there for each other to help with whatever's best for the student. So I'm so happy to hear that you had a positive experience in that.
Yeah,
sure.
It made all the difference in the world.
And it's interesting hearing you say that, Aaron, and even and sharing that, Tim. So, in the K through 12 space, and as you're saying that, I'm trying to think of what that is like for a student to go through the same type of events, but in the collegiate space. If they're living in a dorm or if they're commuting or whatever. And I think the only thing I would share to our listeners, or especially those who are higher education teachers, professors, is like we said all through COVID, we shared so many great conversations and tips about building community, and being your genuine self. Because I think when you do that in that classroom, that mechanism to be open for a student to come forward with that information, because now you're talking about by age, a young adult, right? And they may be just coming to your class and going, and they may be going through a turnstile and they really don't know where to turn, even though there's plenty of resources through so many of our great schools. A professor is going to also be that first line of contact, that first line of I don't want to say defense, but that first line. And if you're presenting them yourself as that stoic, I'm setting the bar up here, you can't approach me type of environment in the classroom, you're really doing yourself a disservice to your students, I think. So, kind of be open, let them share a story of yourself, continue to do those things that we talked all through COVID these past few years. So we can do what you experienced in a way, and then ultimately get them tied into resources. That's the best thing we could ultimately do, I think, is, we can't be a grief counselor. We may not be equipped, but we do have those resources. So, help them get into that if possible.
So you're basically saying that you should show your students that you're human.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Imagine that.
I think that's huge. That is absolutely huge.
And
in fact,
even be vulnerable, Tim, which is, I mean, all of you, every time I see you speak or watch you talking to someone who's grieving, because I've had the privilege to do that. And you have a courage and a vulnerability about you that I think allows people to talk about in the space, because I think everyone's been touched by grief in some way or another. So there's a story somewhere if someone feels comfortable enough to share it.
Absolutely. And thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. And to the point about the students, one story that I'd like to share briefly is about 9/11. Everybody in this country during 9/11, life turned upside down. And at the time I was teaching at MyAd, and 9/11 happened on a Monday, and I had a 3-hour Saturday morning class 5 days later. So it was not canceled, and we approached the classroom. It was a computer-based classroom with about 18 students. And you could feel it. I mean, you could feel the whole 9/11 oppression through weeks afterward. And I was like, wow, what am I going to do? How am I going to deal with this? And I kind of just watched people as they came in, and they were very, very, very sullen. They were very quiet. And I understood exactly where they came from, because everybody was dealing with the same thing. So we talked openly about it briefly. And then as we kind of settled down our discussion, I asked permission if just for the next 2.5 hours, we could push away what had happened and we could have a somewhat normal class. And what I was talking about was, I usually use sarcasm and levity to push through a 3-hour class, and we engage and I bring in real world examples for what we're going through in whatever process we are experiencing on this particular program, dealing with typography or what have you. And I just wanted their permission to just simply push it away and have a class that kind of made us forget just for a moment what had all happened. And everybody agreed to it. And afterwards, I think half of those kids came up to me and said, thank you so much. I so needed that. And I did it because that's what I needed. So don't disregard what you think you would want in those situations. You want people to reach out and give you a hug, in many different ways do it.
I'm hearing acknowledgement, right? We need to just acknowledge whatever it is that has happened, not act like it didn't happen or it's not there. Right, and then absolutely. I like that you asked for permission. I think that's really valuable. I'm sitting here thinking it's hard not to juxtapose death and life. And you often talk about in life, we should recognize our why. So I'm kind of excited about this. I was wondering, could you walk us through the why and how we can determine what ours is, either personally or professionally?
I think that when you experience a loss of somebody, and it could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be a parent. I ironically lost my mother and father 6 months apart, and they were thankfully they lived good lives, but it was tough. It was very tough, and constantly, for instances like that, for instances like the diagnosis of cancer or whatever other disease, we are constantly asking why, right? So why do we not search for our why when we are walking through life to use that why in a positive sense? That would be what kind of goes around in my head often. And when I met my wife, it was through a friend, and my friend, it was a common friend between both of us. And my friend said, I have somebody who lost her husband. She has a little girl, and how would you like to meet her? And at the time, I was actually finishing up a divorce, and I told her, I said, no, I'm good, thank you very much, I'm real good. And I ended up meeting her because this friend reached out and said, hey, can I give her your information? And we went back and forth for about 3 weeks via email, got to know each other, and then we did a little dinner with our common friend. And as I was getting to know Colleen, she was all about living her why, whether it ended up being what she thought it was supposed to be, or whether she discovered what that why was as she was going down a path. And I think with her needing to help people with their diagnosis and give them guideposts along the way. And on my website, I often talk about, walking this path with grief, navigating, and we're giving you guideposts along the way, people who have gone through this, to kind of help you understand what to experience. I find that she was doing the same thing with her life, even for herself, where when there was a point in her path that just didn't seem to be what was supposed to be, she rarely ever looked at that as, oh my gosh, now what am I going to do? She just looked at it constantly as, well, there must be a reason why, now let me go find it. So if there's anything that we can do for any point of our life, to just have the attitude that if something is not happening the way we thought it should, well, let's find out why, and let's go in a slightly different direction. My life, when I was in the midst of a divorce, I could not have imagined meeting Colleen and her amazing daughter, and these two changed my life. I cannot even express how much they changed my life, and they gave me love, they gave me direction, they gave me purpose beyond my imagination, and they provided me with something at the time that I did not have, and that was a clear-cut path to where I was supposed to be going. I don't know if I answered the question.
No, you did. That was great. I mean, there's just so many what I hear is this theme of change. Like, that's just a part of life. Things change, plans change, what we thought was going to be our future change, and getting anxiety just thinking about it, but that's just life. And so I think just talking about it, recognizing it, but also hearing you talk about, even though you've been through some really hard things, I'm also watching you go through some really beautiful things that maybe you wouldn't have wanted to go through, but on the other end of it, I'm seeing some really special things happening in your life. And I think that we all can recognize that in ours as well.
Definitely. And it is depending upon who you lose, you could be losing what you thought your life was going to be. That's a pretty darn big change. Yeah. And you can kick and scream all you want, but at some point in time, you have to stop.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, Tim. You read my mind, and I think I was going along the lines also of saying there's an expectation, or I don't know if it's expectation, this might not be the right word either. Entitlement. So you're living this life, you're doing these things, and everything is going away. You think it's being planned, and then you get hit with a loss. And whether it's a student, whether it's a colleague, whether it's a loved one, family member, and then all of a sudden, if you're not doing some of the things you're talking about, being more aware, that grief thing could really make you challenge yourself and then go into a different direction altogether.
And pretty much take over.
Right. And how could this happen to me? Why did, and the why could ultimately become more of a negative experience if you handle it. Yeah.
Yeah. Completely.
And also, I'm sorry.
No, please, Letitia, go, please.
And I was going to say, and also being very clear that loss doesn't have to just be a person, right?
No, it doesn't.
Loss of a job.
Yep.
Can be huge. Financial status, great loss, and so I think it's important that we kind of put that in perspective too. So I think a lot of times we kind of zero in on a loved one, a friend, a pet, but also these life changes, right? Being your freedom taken away because of COVID is grief.
Oh yeah, that was definitely grief for a lot of people, and a grief that we had never experienced before. Not the kind of grief that we thought that would ever hit us, and we could not identify it.
Absolutely. And then, bringing that in to the point about just being kind of locked away, right? Felt like we were locked away. Community. We've heard so much about community and how much it really has helped him and continues to help you and your family. COVID robbed us of that community, right? So we were grieving in silence. So I think even the loss of our freedom and the ability to be present in community can also be a grieving process.
Well, and you guys as teachers over the last 2 years, you lost so much community. You lost the ability to be face-to-face and to interact and to see somebody's reaction and to relate to that instead of hoping that you're going to see it on a tiny image on a screen. It matters. It makes a huge difference being in person with somebody versus being like we are online or just even the old-fashioned telephone. It makes all the difference in the world. And we had to figure out how the heck we could go through this and still have some sort of a sense of community. 3 of you guys know about the Momentum Workshop, Lou Mangello's workshop. When it came back last year,
it was a boost.
Tell you, oh my gosh, you could feel it. You got 50 people coming into that room, and the level was amazing. And that happened to how many people over the course of the last 12 months when they finally got to go to a family reunion, or when they finally got to see their grandmother that they were trying to stay away from. The ability to finally give a physical hug to somebody that you normally would have several times a month, but you hadn't for several months. That's just ridiculous. We never experienced that before in our entire lives. No wonder we're trying to figure out how in the world do we deal with this, and identifying it as, hey guys, this was all grief. It's a huge step.
Absolutely. Tim, I'll give you let you in on something. When I saw Pete for the first time, we've been doing the podcast, I was like ready to cry. Yep. I was like, he's live. Next is Fred, but man, see,
and Pete gives good hugs too.
Oh man, and he's funny.
He's definitely funny.
Okay, all right. It It was awesome. It was
Tim,
awesome.
knowing who you are for a number of years now, and having the pleasure of listening to your podcast and experiencing you and taking advice from you and just watching you in awe, some of your presentations I've enjoyed. I'm curious, in your background, in your childhood, what teachers, coaches, mentors have had an impact on you? You mentioned teachers. Who in your life has helped mold that Tim that we know now?
Yeah, that's a great question. The number one person would have to be my choir director in high school, and his name was Charles Zelmer, and we all called him Zelm. And he was everybody's father. He was everybody's friend. Yet he could scold you and put you in your place when necessary. So that well-rounded ability that he had was priceless. But he gave people chances, and he gave them not chances to prove themselves, but chances to fail and to also come back from whatever that failure was. Sometimes it was bigger, sometimes it was smaller. And that was huge. I mean, that meant everything to so many people, because especially those people that, personalities are completely different across the board. So you've got people who are very introverted and very quiet, and they're not going to speak out for themselves. And you have the other ones that you wish, for God's sake, they would stop talking. And he was able to allow those people that would not, that was good, that would not speak for themselves, to give them the ability to try something. And that was huge. He did that for myself. He did that for many of my friends. And he did it in such a way where no matter if you ended up discovering that perhaps you weren't the best at this or that or whatever, at least you tried, and at least maybe there was some aspect of that you discovered that you otherwise wouldn't have. So he's definitely the best mentor that I ever had. And many of the friends that grew up with him in high school will say the exact same thing.
That's awesome. And what I'm hearing is, Pete, whenever you need a background singer.
Hey.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm thinking to myself,
Fred.
Tim's I'm like, Tim's singing?
Fred's in a choir. Wow, we could start. We could start a choir. Five of us.
We could be our own boy band and call ourselves No Direction.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You heard it here, folks. No Direction.
Yeah.
All right. So Tim, this is the part where we would like to kind of share, and I really like this part because it's interesting to hear. Sometimes there's some similar same things, and a lot of times we each kind of have a little nugget that we picked from the conversation that's different. So we're going to do that and use our guest. Tim could little final word or something, that an inspiration or anything that came to you with the conversation. Does that sound okay?
That sounds great.
Okay. Letitia, I'm going to let you go first tonight.
See, Fred? I got you, man. I got you.
Now I know what it's like to sit in the back of the class.
Finally.
So, our entire conversation was just super rich. Tim, thank you so much for lending your voice and your courage tonight. I was just extremely fascinated about the why. And this is not a direct quote, but what I took from your explanation was approach each challenge like an opportunity to expand and embrace your why.
It's a good way to put it. I like that. Yes.
Yeah. And that is setting me free. Just embrace your why.
Love it.
Yeah. You know, if my wife didn't embrace her why when we first met, we would not have gotten married, and her incredible strength. And I'm sorry to interject here. I know.
No, you're fine.
Everybody gets to talk, but
no, it's fine.
If she wasn't open enough to take one step forward and then another step forward and open the door and let me into her life, we would never have continued our relationship. Now, of course, I came not that I'm forceful, but I definitely have a charm. So I'll just go that way. And I proposed in Disney World. So
win-win.
Exactly.
All right, Pete.
Hey, everyone should be encouraged to grieve the way they need to and the way they want to. Drop the mic. That's it.
Yes, that's it.
That sums it up. And it's so good to see you, my friend.
Thank you. Same here.
Okay, Fred, it's you.
So I have two I'm going to share. So the first one is when we were talking about the why, what really kind of struck me, Tim, was that one reminder for everybody when you're thinking about your why, or you have a gift or you have a skill and you're applying it, but how you do good with it. I think that's a great way to begin your day. Whether it's a morning of meditation or prayer, or even wrapping up the end of the day, is like, this is what I do. How do I even go about doing better with it, or doing good with it? Yeah. I love that thought process. And the other one is, I'm going to be super excited as we start our new band called No Direction.
I can't wait. Letitia and I will be front row.
Make the logo.
Groupies.
I got caught up in the story, Tim, about the pillow that Colleen had, the pillow that said grateful on it.
Yep.
It just, there's a couple things. The first thing is, as I listen to you, and I've sat with you a couple of these conversations, hearing the story and continuing to learn more, I feel like I keep getting the pleasure of getting to know Colleen, which I think is really special because, she may not be of this earth, but I feel like I continue to get to know this person that I think I would have been really good friends with. So it's a pleasure to continue to get to know her. And so the story of the pillow and this, it's like she keeps giving you, she's given you so many gifts. And so it reminds me of my time and the people that I'm with, and even spending time with you, that, I hope that there are things that I can model or be my best self, so that, perhaps whenever my time is done, that the people in my life, that there are small little gifts, maybe, that I've left behind. So, not a particular quote, but just my mind's been on that throughout this whole conversation. And so I'm so thankful you came here and made us feel safe to talk about this in this space. So with that being said, you kind of get the last little word or little thing tonight that came to you, if you'd like.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, I almost had to grab the tissue on that last one. So that touched my heart. I just want to thank you guys for everything that you do, and not only for your audience, but in your everyday lives, and the way that you have made me feel tonight. Letitia, first time meeting you, and it feels like I've known you for years, and you other three have known you for several years, and I can't even begin to tell you how much your friendship means to me. And for those listeners that are out there, those three people, we have met only 3 times, maybe two times, maybe. And it was like meeting family the very first time. And when we met each other again and talked with each other, it was like we had never been apart. Yeah. And you need to find people like that in your life. And it does not necessarily mean the people down the road or across the street or in your community. Broaden your horizons. If COVID has taught us anything, is that you can successfully have friendships and you can successfully care for somebody, even when you're miles and miles apart. So thank you, my friends. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. And Tim, if people want to connect or listen to the podcast, where can they find you?
They can find the podcast either on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or directly on my website. The podcast is Journey to Grateful, and the website is journeytograteful.com. And, feel free to listen to anything and give me some responses. Give me some feedback. Tell me your story. I would love to hear it. But above all else, if you have anybody that you know who is going through grief that you might be trying to support, offer them this resource for them to perhaps just discover that they're not alone.
Yep. Very good. Thank you. And Pete, how about our group? Where can they continue to find us and connect?
Our website, teacherpeprally.com. Join our Facebook group, Instagram, YouTube, and leave us a review wherever you listen to us tonight. We would really appreciate it. Really helps.
Yeah, great. Well, this has been a really deep, beautiful conversation. I appreciate all of you. And thank you again, Tim.
Thank you.